Ladies and gentlemen, grab your popcorn and your bear down towel because what happened at Soldier Field this past Saturday was nothing short of a soap opera wrapped inside a football game. A rain-soaked, mic malfunctioning, chapstick-addicted fever dream of a preseason opener that started with the Chicago Bears looking dead in the water, down 10-0 to a Cleveland Browns team that is, by every possible measure, an absolute organizational mess right now. And by the time the final whistle blew, the Bears had ripped off 24 unanswered points, uncovered a pair of jaw-dropping breakout stars, and left an entire fan base buzzing about a team that hasn't even played a real snap of the regular season yet. This is the story of how Chicago's first home preseason game of the year turned into an absolute roller coaster, and trust me, you are going to want to hear every single twist. Let's set the scene. It's a soggy, humid Saturday in Chicago. The skies refuse to cooperate. It's raining sideways at Soldier Field, and somehow, someway, thousands of diehard Bears fans still packed the stands like it was a playoff game in January. Meanwhile, across the parking lots, tailgates were roaring in the downpour because that's just what Bears fans do. Rain or shine, sleet or hail, this fan base shows up. And this wasn't just any preseason game. This was the very first look at a Chicago Bears team coming off an NFC North championship, a team that spent the entire offseason being called the trendy pick to make real noise this year. Expectations were sky high walking into this one, and for about a quarter and a half, it looked like the hype train might have hit a pothole. Cleveland struck first. Their new head coach, a Chicagoland native making his very first appearance on an NFL sideline, watched his defense force a quick 3-and-out from the Bears' second-string offense, and then his own offense marched right down the field for a field goal, followed shortly by a long, methodical touchdown drive that put Cleveland up 10-0 before most fans had even finished their first hot dog. Now, before you panic, remember this detail because it matters a lot. The Chicago Bears did not have their starters anywhere near this football game. Not their franchise quarterback, not their top cornerback. Almost the entire projected opening day offense was standing on the sideline in street clothes because their head coach made the very deliberate, very smart decision to protect his stars and let the roster bubble guys fight for their NFL lives instead. So when Cleveland jumped out to that early lead, what fans were actually watching wasn't a referendum on the real Chicago Bears. It was a live, real-time job interview for a whole bunch of guys trying to convince their coaching staff they deserve a spot on this roster. And that, right there, is where this story gets good. Enter the man of the hour, an undrafted, mostly anonymous wide receiver who nobody outside of hardcore Bears circles had ever heard of before this game. This kid had bounced around, spent time on a rival team's practice squad a couple years back, and walked into Soldier Field as an afterthought at the bottom of the wide receiver depth chart. By the time the second Q2 was over, he had turned into the unquestioned breakout star of the entire preseason opener. 4 catches, 88 yards, a ridiculous contested tiptoe grab down the sideline that had the broadcast booth losing their minds. This is exactly what preseason football is supposed to be about, folks. One getting called out on final roster cutdown day. But he wasn't the only diamond in the rough Chicago unearthed on Saturday. Anonymously grinding away on the practice squad, turned in an absolute star-making performance that had fans in the live chat legitimately mispronouncing his name in excitement all afternoon. 3 tackles, numbers for a full calendar year now. This guy strapped a rocket to his own roster chances with a 4th down strip sack that completely flipped the game's momentum. 1 second, Cleveland was driving, threatening to blow this thing wide open, and the next second, the ball was popping loose and bouncing right into the arms of the Chicago Bears defense. The chat exploded. The stream nearly broke, and just like that, the entire complexion of this game changed. Because here's the thing about that turnover, it didn't just stop the bleeding, it lit a fuse. Chicago's backup quarterback, a fan favorite entering his 4th season as an undrafted success story, marched the offense right down the field and found his tight end in the end zone to make it a 1-score game. Then, in one of the more electric sequences of the entire afternoon, that same quarterback hooked up with his new favorite target, the aforementioned no-name wideout sensation, on play after play, dragging Chicago all the way down to Cleveland's doorstep before the half expired. A clutch field goal as time wound down tied the game at 10 apiece heading into the locker room, and just like that, a game that looked like a disaster in the first quarter had completely flipped on its head. Now, let's talk quarterbacks for a second. because this preseason opener turned into a legitimate audition for one of the most fascinating storylines heading into the regular season. Chicago's primary backup quarterback, who league insiders have already floated as a potential trade chip for teams desperate for starting caliber depth, finished his day completing better than half his passes for over 160 yards and a touchdown, even with one costly interception mixed in. This is a guy who threw for over 500 yards across 3 preseason games a year ago, who led an absolutely unforgettable comeback against a defending conference contender last season, and who Chicago's own coaching staff has openly called a top 32 caliber arm in this entire league. Translation, folks, there are 32 teams in the NFL, and this backup could probably start for a handful of them. Rival front offices have already been calling to check on his availability, and after this performance, don't be shocked if that phone rings even louder. But then, in relief, a grizzled 38-year-old veteran journeyman quarterback stepped in for the second half and put on an absolute clinic. This guy once led a different franchise to the doorstep of a Super Bowl years ago, and on Saturday he looked like he hadn't aged a day. He spun out of a near sack for a scrambling first down, delivered a gorgeous rainbow touchdown throw on a broken coverage that resulted in a house call, and then added a second touchdown pass late for good measure, finishing the day with over 150 yards and a pair of scores. Two different quarterbacks, two completely different styles, and both of them making a statement on a day when absolutely nobody expected a highlight reel. Meanwhile, on the ground, the running back competition that everybody in Chicago has been buzzing about all summer got a whole lot murkier. One hopeful, an oft-injured back trying to prove his body could hold up for a full season, picked up a nice handful of tough physical runs early before getting shut down for depth purposes. Another newcomer, a bruising, physical runner brought in from a division rival on a one-year prove-it deal, exploded for a highlight reel 60-plus yard touchdown scamper in the third quarter that had jaws on the floor, showing off exactly the kind of speed and vision that made his college tape must-watch material. And then, just to make things even messier, a big bully of a power back who's been a fan favorite for years bulldozed his way into the end zone late in the fourth quarter to help seal the win. 3 different backs, 3 different styles, and the Chicago Bears now have themselves a genuinely fun, genuinely difficult decision to make when final roster cuts roll around. Let's not forget the trenches either, because the most nerve-wracking subplot of this entire game was happening on the offensive line, where a former third-round pick who has struggled mightily to find the field over his first 2 seasons in the league got the start at left tackle and knew, going in, that this was a legitimate make-or-break moment for his entire career in Chicago. His blocking was shaky early, a little slow off the snap against a stiff Cleveland front, but he settled in as the game wore on and gave his coaching staff at least something to think about. Waiting in the wings behind him is a former top 10 draft pick who spent years starting for Cleveland before knee injuries derailed his momentum, and who now says he feels the healthiest he's felt in years. This left tackle battle is far from over, and Saturday's performance did absolutely nothing to settle the debate. If anything, it might have made it even more of a toss-up heading into the next several weeks of training camp. On defense, this was a legitimately dominant showing for long stretches. Chicago forced a 3-and-out on Cleveland's very first offensive series of the entire season. They batted down passes, they stuffed run after run in the backfield. A hard-hitting new safety brought in from a division rival snap, and a rookie cornerback who many draft analysts had pegged as a potential second-round talent before Chicago scooped him up. Immediately after the final whistle, he had to sprint to his car and drive an hour and a half north for his 6th wedding of an absolutely brutal wedding season, with 3 more still on the calendar before the year is out. The live chat, meanwhile, ballooned to well over 400 fans at its peak, calling in from literal Thailand, from England, from the Netherlands, from Canada, from all across the United States, everybody united by nothing but a shared, borderline unhealthy devotion to a preseason football game that technically didn't even count. There were mic malfunctions, there were battles with bots flooding the chat, there was a heartfelt shout-out to a newborn baby already decked out in his own tiny Bears onesie, and there was a genuinely touching moment where the host paused the broadcast to send love and support to fans dealing with the aftermath of severe storms that knocked out power across parts of the region. By the time the dust settled, the final score read 24-10. Chicago and the Bears had officially wiped out Cleveland's early lead with 24 unanswered points across the final three quarters. And look, everybody watching knows the score of a preseason game means basically nothing in the grand scheme of things. Nobody is printing playoff tickets off the back of a Week 1 exhibition win. But what this game absolutely did deliver was clarity, and a whole lot of it. It gave Chicago's coaching staff real, meaningful film on exactly which unproven guys can be trusted when the lights get brighter. It gave the fan base a legitimately electric new name to obsess over at wide receiver. It gave a defensive lineman who spent all of last year buried on the practice squad a golden opportunity to force his way onto the 53-man roster. And it gave everybody a first, tantalizing taste of a football season that Chicago has been starving for since the moment last year's campaign wrapped up. There's still plenty of drama left simmering under the surface, too. Chicago's top wide receiver is working his way back from a groin injury that was originally supposed to sideline him for weeks, and by all early accounts, he's already running full routes at full speed in practice. A wildly encouraging sign that he could be full go by the time the regular season kicks off. There's a defensive edge rusher on a division rival that Chicago has reportedly already called about, even as that rival publicly insists he's not going anywhere, a storyline absolutely worth keeping an eye on as the trade deadline chatter heats up. And there's still a very real, very unresolved quarterback trade subplot bubbling in the background, with multiple teams reportedly sniffing around Chicago's talented ascending backup, wondering if a blockbuster deal could land him a starting job somewhere else entirely. Add it all up, and this was about as perfect a preseason opener as a fan base could possibly ask for. A slow, rocky start, a furious, backup-fueled comeback, a pair of legitimate breakout stars nobody saw coming, a rock-solid defensive effort that generated multiple turnovers against a struggling divisional-adjacent opponent trying to find its footing under a brand-new coaching staff, and an entire fan base from Chicago's South Side all the way to a rain-soaked parking lot outside Soldier Field, from Wisconsin to Thailand, all locked in together on a rainy Saturday afternoon, buzzing about Bears football being back. So here's what we want to know from all of you. Who was your player of the game? Was it the no-name wideout who came out of nowhere to torch Cleveland's secondary? Was it the third-year defensive lineman who might have just saved his entire roster spot with one massive strip sack? Or is your money still on the backup quarterback who continues making a case that he deserves a starting job somewhere in this league? Drop your pick down in the comments below, because we read every single one of them. Genuinely helps push this content out to more Bears fans just like you. And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, now is the time to battle every trade rumor and every single game all season long, and you do not want to miss a single second of it. Turn on that notification bell too, so you never miss a live stream, a breaking news up season as we are, and we will see you right back here for the next one. Bear down, everybody.